Moment 1. At around 11 in the morning, I am in the living room of the Paris apartment. I am trying to get my life, and by extension myself, together. I'm exercising on my mother's yoga mat. I'm doing the exercises which I know will take the least amount of time to give me the highest degree of relief. Usually coupled with an ice-cold shower afterward does the trick. In my phone before this, I wrote, "Not sure to whom, do forehead kisses count on ecstasy?" I'm going through youth and its city, and no one will sell me the answer. So I am lying on this mat doing these exercises to get my brain chemistry to be slightly better, and I'm thinking about the much faster and frankly much more cathartic way in which I have spent my time obtaining the hormones that wall up and shield me from the looming dread which follows me like a much taller, much more ancient version of myself. The hormones, the happy hormones, the runner's high hormones, the you thought it wasn't hitting, but they hit you like a truck hormones, the oh shit hormones, oh shit, oh shit, shit. I feel so fucking good right now, so fucking good. Never want to feel anything else again, please. Substances and ownership, or substances as ownership, the latter being the thesis ? I wrote across very, very dazed afternoons in a note, the title of which is Things I Think About Too Much. Substance related things I think about too much, according to the list: hair of the dog, intimacy under substances, substance-induced emotional bonding, more tangentially substance-related things on the list, liminal spaces, the human ability to yearn, people as ghosts, standing at the top of very tall things, things being asymptotic, time bubbles, escapism at any cost, wanting to take a picture of your mind, ergo the things I think about too much list. Yearn so strong you feel it in your body, the effects of a hangover on my appetite, being super chill, written twice, shame and refusing to spell it, even when you have the letters to, Hemingway's Paris, Breaking Bad, soothing, painkillers, being cool about it, having the anxiety levels of someone being hunted for sport, being just a little high all the time. Moment 2. This list, of which you are hearing only an extract, I read in full to some electrical engineer / musician sitting on Place de la République's Blonde's Lion at around 1 a.m. after a poetry open mic in which I had given an, I'm told, very sober looking performance, and then had very drunk conversations about, was drunk at both. At the poetry open mic, we talked about substances. On the line, he told me he had done shrooms, and he seemed like the kind of person who would enjoy very smart, neurotic, one would say. And he adds to the concepts list superposition. Superposition, which is the ability of a quantum system to be in multiple states at the same time until it is measured. This is relevant to today's discussion. Today's discussion, substances, or more accurately, the use of them as more accurately the reclamation of self-ownership. a thing I have been particularly busy thinking about, with the same, if increasingly convoluted conclusion. Allow me to illustrate moment 3. Late night / early morning discussion with a boy in a shitty student residence in the northern suburbs of Paris, the story of which would require another essay written thing. Looking at the ceiling, I'm wearing a French stoner t-shirt, which he has ironically lent me, and we were talking about drugs after some Australian fellow tried and failed to buy some, in the hopes I would enjoy them with him, and then he would, we reckon, enjoy me with them. When discussing the topic, that aforementioned late night, early morning, the thing I am able to say which makes the most sense to me is I never feel or felt like I owned myself, I think, until recently, and even then I don't know. The boy takes a sharp breath, which might be a short gasp. He says he understands. One of the reasons for this lack of self-ownership, I believe, is the degree to which I feel I am at times but a passenger in my own flesh, albeit experiencing consciousness. I'm playing the game, but I do not choose any of its rules. The colors I see, just the shape of things, the passing of time, the code, my brain chemistry, the framework. This is why I reckon another Notes app entry reads, "Taking drugs feels like writing a novel." I wrote this because when consciousness and its parameters so often feel imposed, there is a sense of agency in being able to let something reshuffle the cards of what has seemed to be the walls of reality, surely because they are the walls of reality. To own your brain feels like I can rework the traffic of it, the very way information circulates, the very essence of what it is. To own your brain feels like I once read that the brain has the same texture as soft tofu, and despite the Notes app mentioning the feeling at standing at the top of very tall things, the reality is everything you have ever felt and cared for and seen and experienced. You have felt and cared for and seen and experienced through this big block of soft tofu, and you are, if not its designer, its parenthesis co-pilot. Take that, brain, take that, body. Don't know where you are now, don't know what you are. Well, you and me both, but you more than me. I wrote this, and to me it especially makes sense because there is a very strong difference between the being sent to space, which is intentional, and the one which isn't. My point being, one would think, and be right in thinking, that those who struggle to be fully conscious in their sober moments, such as myself, would not enjoy the exacerbated mimicking of this sensation through substances. That is a fair point, but it is also one which brings me back to the previous one, ownership. Moment 4. First month, freshman year birthday party, not my own. I am disassociated as fuck, and I am not enjoying it. I drank shitty rum with no dinner, which is objectively a terrible decision, but the parameters of which are consequently different. If you know, I am doing this to myself. It is not being done to me in the eternal chicken and egg of brain chemistry and self and consciousness. I have pulled out the trump card of chemicals and smashed both chicken and egg on the kitchen floor with it until they are one and the same. First, the dissociation always feels like swimming against a current, and no happy hormone, simply the dread lotus statement that something is not working like it should, substances working exactly as they should. In the sense, should here is to be understood neither as normative nor as spiritual. It is simply chemistry. The difference between something being done to you and through you, the gap between violence and kink, the car slows down because it is out of fuel, or the car slows down because you are slowing it down. Superposition. My point is substances read as ownership because they are your damage inflicted by you, through you, in a way which, unlike other behaviors which follow a relatively similar mechanism, alter the very perception of reality which you have, the core of it all. The alienation you feel as the recurring character in yourself becomes etched in the very DNA of perception, stitched in the fabric, endogenous, materialized, and in that it becomes your own. Change from inwards if you have nothing else. This body has not felt like yours, but when you rewrite its fabric, it is because it has to be. Getting yourself back from the inside out, rewriting the language of reality, the narrative, the time, the atoms in the worlds themselves, or more so in your perception of them. Ownership, superposition, taking drugs feels like writing a novel, like a kid drawing on her mother's expensive clothes for the sake of telling herself a story. I feel the drug alive in my fingertips and my toes, and the feeling is mine, mine, mine. I can feel novels being written in my organs by chemicals, and they are mine, mine, mine. Take that, God. Take that, brain. Mine. Buckle up. Have you ever heard of the pharmacon? The term is often attributed to Plato, derived from the ancient Greek term pharmakeia, which refers both to the use of medicine and to the use of poisons. Plato conceptualized it as a substance or practice which exists in the liminal space between heal and harm, another meaning scapegoat. The eternal ping-pong ball of it bouncing through a body and thus making it an alive and tangible thing, the ubiquity, all of these things being able to be captured and felt through the body is ownership. What does it even mean to own? Ownership, the act, state, or right of possessing something. One, the act, I am destroying these chemicals because they are my chemicals, and through the loss of them, I confirm this. Their graveyards or their zombie cells are the martyrs of my own violence. Mine, mine, mine. I am ruining my potential, and in that process, I am choosing to make the my real at the expense of the word which it qualifies. Two, the state. This one is trickier, I would say. I would index this to the feeling of absolution. The feel-good hormones just rush through you in waves so strong. You feel them in parts of your body that existed before you were born. The notion of your body having its own language and telling you things only you can understand, or perhaps that no one can understand, something you were born with. Yes, perhaps even which was born before you were, before there was a before and an after. Something primal. stripping yourself of every burden of reality until it is just you and the ether, you who owns yourself in the ether. There is no reality because there is no unreality. I'm 12 and I'm 20 and I'm 100. 3, right. This one is trickier, and then it's not really tricky at all. It is the foundation and the process and the outcome of the act 1 and the state 2. When I was in high school and a better student, I was taught that property translates to the right to use, abuse, and sell something. Is there a difference between ownership of property and ownership between property and ownership? ChatGPT says yes. He says property is the thing that is owned, while ownership is the legal relationship or rights that a person or entity has to that property. And that is the ecstatic Venn diagram intersection, rising tall like heaven to become the thing that is owned and the right to own it. And in that snake biting its own tail continuity, the difference between ownership and the obtention of feel-good hormones through toil, say me exercising on my mother's yoga mat on my apartment floor, and through substances, is the former is built on consistency and goes uphill. The latter does neither of these things. It only gets worse. I will never take drugs on the basis of it being a long-term good decision for my inner chemical workings. I mean, this is the case for some people. I'm sure it's not mine. And in that cathartic, catalytic sense, the latter exists in and for itself, and in that there is a form of reclamation of the self and the now. There is a rejection of the knowledge of what is objectively good and healthy, and the fact that my mother owns a book called Trop intelligent pour être heureux, which she has tried to get me to read for years, and the fact that I have been pushing the same boulder for as long as I've had arms to push, or even probably before that, and there's something cathartic in taking something which makes you finally get up that hill, not through success or effort or reality, but dream space levitation. God, this fucking brain won't give me a break. Ownership, I will give it, which is myself, a break. Going back to Plato, Preciado, who I was first introduced at 15-ish through his complicated relationship with my friend's mother, and who I was reintroduced to in a history of the occult class, for which I did little history of the occult and a lot of cursed poetry, has had many thoughts about this. I would recommend reading what I will do a very poor job at paraphrasing. But Preciado very acutely describes his personal journey of testosterone use as a trans man, the way the hormones act like couriers throughout his body, which industrialization had turned into some station. The experimentation of it and the sense of self/ownership/self-ownership, which comes from it, this can be, I think, expanded to a broader reflection on the use of recreational drugs as an alteration of consciousness through which individuals can challenge conventional modes of thinking, which I experience as I am making this brain unable to do what I have been told it should do, and I am doing this by choice, kind of Luddite, if you will, insofar as the machine is my brain, or the brain is the machine, and productivity is expected of it, and rebellion is its destruction. Preciado also describes the pharmacopornographic era, which relates to how drugs influence the perception and use of bodies, which are, like the intimacy they produce, commodified. let it be clear. On a macro level, and not even on a macro level, but on a sensible level, much of what I have said thus far, without and even with nuance, is bullshit. I believe in the legalization of some recreational drugs, the opening of the possibility of others through scientific and ethical discussion. I believe in the end of hyper-policing and imprisonment of marginalized communities on the pretense of drug use. I believe in the end of the dispossession of indigenous communities' practices which involve substances. I do not believe that reckless substance use, in my individual case, is the path to emancipation. I have lost enough friends and friendships to addiction and called enough people in and out of hospitals to know. I know substances just make the dissociation worse, which at least gives it a reason, but a reason only takes you so far. Also, I believe that substances in their wide pharmacological, pharmacopornographic sense, thank you, Preciado, are used in mechanisms of mass control, impoverishment, and contemporary segregation. Thank you, Michel Foucault. Thank you, biopolitics. I'm not also unaware of the gender dynamics at play in all of this, notably in regards to the pharmacon character of substances as both a source of reclamation of the body and of a state, ergo an act, ergo a right, which has consistently been taken advantage of. I know all this, and the necropolitical's only adversary is a cheap vodka bought in a cheap corner store with the promise of sample-sized oblivion and body-sized silence in it. This is how addicts fall like dominoes. Grief beckons grief, beckons grief. Grief is built with a gut hungry for more of it. I know this. Hurt beckons hurt, beckons hurt. But my hurt, as in the hurt I am experiences, as in this can mean many different things. What I try to do, make the hurt mine, make me mine through it. Moment 3, again, late night, early morning, when I say all of this to the boy and ask him about his relationship with substances, he tells me about the time he took fentanyl-laced pot and ended up in the hospital and had spirits calling his name and thought he was going to die and didn't die. And I would say I'm glad he didn't die, and he giggles. There's Patti Smith and cheap cereal on the counter, and the sun is creeping in with more and more hunger, and my body has finished fighting against myself and has won, and by that I mean I am sobering up. Restraint. That's what he says. What about restraint as ownership? He looks at me, and to some capacity I know what he means. I know what he means and how the hardest thing is to tell yourself no, and how the right is the right to give yourself duty, accountability. What the philosopher said, you know the drill. And perhaps this is the near-death experience in him talking. Perhaps it is the wisdom I don't have, or more so have to act upon it. Perhaps, and more likely, it is the knowledge that the road to self, through the increasing dilation of it into space, leads you to a version of yourself which feels easier to own by virtue of there being less of it. He tells me once he starts, he can't stop. And I know what he means. God, I know. As most things, restraint is appreciated to the extent of the appreciation of what it protects. I'm working on that. I am. And I've been a good kid. My whole life I have, so why did I do it? Looking at the sunset on top of Montmartre, on top of Paris, on top of my youth hours before this momentary late night, early morning, I told the boy I had not felt free and had not had the language to express it even. Perhaps the deprivation of clear conscience is the removal of the fluff. Perhaps the deprivation of clear conscience is what one needs to value it again. Perhaps substance-induced emotional bonding is subject to the same mechanisms. In The Harbor Beyond the Movie, poet Luke Kennard says, "We will give each other a disease to which we alone are the cure, the curse that reinfects, the reinfection that's the cure." Sometimes I think ownership is this: to give yourself a disease to which you alone are the cure, the curse that reinfects, the reinfection that's the cure. I never see the boy again. Moment 1. I finish exercising. I take a cold shower. I don't want to, but I do. They're known to stimulate endorphin release. Did you know that? I did. I know. I know. I know now.